God says, watch this before it is too late. Jesus says, this is a warning you need right now, not later, not tomorrow, right now. Stop scrolling. This is not like the last thing you watched. Something in you already knows this message is different. You felt it the second you stopped. Trust that feeling. Here is the warning. Simple. Direct. No decoration. You have been ignoring something. You know exactly what it is. It flashed through your mind the moment you read that sentence. That thing you keep pushing down. That thing you tell yourself you will deal with later. Later has already run out more times than you want to admit. This message exists because later just became now. Think about the last time you felt truly at peace. Not distracted. Not numbed by noise. Actually peaceful. Can you remember it clearly? If you cannot, that itself is the warning. Something has been slowly pulling your peace away. Piece by piece. Day by day. So slowly you barely noticed it happening. Until now. Here is what nobody tells you about warnings like this one. They rarely arrive as lightning bolts. They arrive as quiet, persistent nudges you have learned to ignore. A feeling in your chest. A thought you push away too quickly. A conversation you keep avoiding. Think about how many of these quiet nudges you have already received this month alone. A moment of unexpected sadness. A physical sensation you brushed off too quickly. A thought that surfaced at 3 a.m. and disappeared by morning. Each one was this same message, arriving early, in a smaller voice. You have been ignoring the nudges. This message is the moment they finally get loud enough to hear. Ask yourself honestly. What have you been avoiding? Not the easy answer. The real one. Maybe it is a relationship slowly falling apart while you pretend everything is fine. Maybe it is your own health, quietly declining while you tell yourself you will start tomorrow. Maybe it is a truth about yourself you have refused to face because facing it would mean changing everything. Whatever it is, you already know. You knew before you opened this message. Notice how quickly that specific thing surfaced, faster than you expected, almost as though it had been waiting just beneath the surface for permission to finally be named. That speed itself is telling. Buried things rarely surface that quickly unless they have been sitting close to the surface all along. Here is why this matters so much right now. Warnings like this one do not repeat forever. There comes a point where the window closes, not because anyone is punishing you, but because delay itself has a cost, and that cost compounds the longer it goes unpaid. Think of this the way you might think of a small leak in a roof. Ignored long enough, it stops being a small, manageable repair and becomes a much larger, more expensive problem, not because the leak itself grew more dramatic, but because time allowed the damage to spread quietly, unnoticed, until it became unavoidable. You have been paying that cost quietly. Exhaustion. Disconnection. A creeping sense that something is wrong even when you cannot name it. This message is naming it for you. Consider how much of your recent tiredness might trace back not to how much you have been doing, but to how much you have been carrying unaddressed beneath the surface. Physical rest does not fully resolve this particular kind of exhaustion. Only genuine engagement with the actual source does. Jesus is not asking you to panic. Panic helps no one. He is asking you to finally look directly at what you have been avoiding, instead of glancing at it sideways and quickly looking away again. Look at it now. Fully. Just for a moment. What did you see? Here is something important. This warning is not punishment. It is love, speaking plainly because gentler approaches have already failed to get through. Think about someone who loves you enough to tell you a hard truth instead of a comfortable lie. That is what this message is doing right now. You deserve that kind of honesty. Even when it is uncomfortable. Especially when it is uncomfortable. Here is something worth pausing on. Notice how your body feels right now, reading this. Tension somewhere. A tightness in your chest. A restless energy that will not quite settle. That physical response is information. It is telling you this message landed somewhere real, somewhere true, somewhere you have been avoiding looking at directly. Do not dismiss what your body just told you. Here is the part most people skip past. The fear underneath the avoidance. You are not avoiding this thing because you are lazy or weak. You are avoiding it because some part of you is genuinely afraid of what facing it might mean. Afraid of the outcome. Afraid of the process. Afraid of who you might have to become on the other side of finally dealing with it. That fear is real. It deserves acknowledgement, not shame. But fear was never meant to run your entire life. It was meant to be noticed, respected, and then walked through anyway. Think about the specific worst-case scenario your mind keeps replaying regarding this matter. Now consider, honestly, how likely that specific scenario actually is, versus how many other, more manageable outcomes are genuinely more probable. Fear rarely bothers with probability. It simply plays the worst possible version on repeat until you mistake it for the most likely one. Here is a question worth sitting with. If nothing changes, if you continue exactly as you are for another year, what does your life look like? Really picture it. Not vaguely. Specifically. Does that picture scare you a little? If it does, that fear is useful. Let it move you instead of freezing you. Now picture the opposite. 1 year from today, having actually faced this thing instead of continuing to avoid it. What does that version of your life look like? Notice the difference between these two pictures. That difference is exactly what is at stake in this particular moment, right now, as you read these words. Here is what taking this seriously actually looks like. Not some dramatic, instant transformation. Something smaller. Something real. One honest conversation you have been avoiding. One appointment you keep postponing. One truth you finally say out loud, even just to yourself. That is where this begins. Not with everything solved. With one honest step. What is your one step? You already know it. Name it right now, even silently. Consider writing that step down somewhere. On your phone. On a piece of paper. Anywhere you will actually see it again in the next few hours. Words written down carry more weight than thoughts left floating unattached inside your head. Here is why today specifically matters. Clarity like this does not stay this sharp forever. Give it a few hours and the noise of ordinary life will start dulling it again. This is the moment. Not tomorrow's version of you. This version, right now, reading these words. Take advantage of it. Here is something worth understanding about how many times this exact clarity has already visited you before today. Think honestly. Has something like this crossed your mind before, only to fade once your phone buzzed, once a task pulled your attention away, once ordinary life simply swallowed it whole? That pattern deserves to be broken today. Not next time. Today. Here is something worth understanding about the specific cost of one more delay. Each time you let clarity like this slip away unattended, avoidance gets a little more comfortable, a little more familiar, a little harder to interrupt the next time. This message is your interruption. Do not let it pass by unanswered the way the others did. Here is something that might surprise you. Jesus has something else to say here, something that was not part of the plan when this message started. He says this: "The thing you are most afraid people will discover about you is the exact thing that, once faced honestly, will finally set you free." Sit with that. Do not rush past it. That sentence was not generic. Something specific just surfaced in your mind as you read it. Do not dismiss it. Notice how quickly your mind may have tried to explain that sentence away, to make it about someone else, about something smaller, about anything other than the actual, specific truth that surfaced. That deflection itself is worth noticing. Return to whatever actually surfaced. Let it stay in view a moment longer, rather than allowing it to slip back into hiding the way it usually does. Here is one more thing worth understanding about this particular fear, the fear of being discovered. It has been quietly running your decisions for longer than you probably realize, shaping what you say, what you avoid saying, who you let close and who you keep at a careful distance. That fear has been costing you connection. Real, genuine connection, the kind that only becomes possible once you stop hiding the exact thing you have been most afraid to reveal. Consider what it might cost you to keep hiding it for another year. Then consider what it might give you to finally stop. Here is the honest truth about warnings. Most people hear them and feel a flash of recognition, then quickly explain it away. That is easier. It is also how the same warning ends up arriving again and again, each time a little louder, a little harder to ignore. Do not let this be another one you explain away. Think about the specific explanation your mind is already reaching for right now, the reason this particular message does not really apply to you, or the reason now is not quite the right time. Notice that explanation clearly, because naming it takes away much of its power. Here is something worth understanding about how these explanations tend to sound. Reasonable. Calm. Almost convincing. That is exactly what makes them dangerous. They rarely sound like excuses in the moment. They sound like wisdom, like patience, like simply waiting for better timing. But wisdom does not usually feel this comfortable when something genuinely important is at stake. Real wisdom sometimes feels uncomfortable, urgent, even inconvenient. If your particular explanation feels a little too smooth, a little too reassuring, consider that this might be avoidance wearing a disguise. Here is what doubt sounds like right now, if it has shown up. A voice saying this message is generic, that it does not really apply to you specifically. Notice that voice. Ask yourself honestly whether it is careful thinking or simply the same avoidance this message has been describing, wearing a new disguise. Here is something worth understanding about why doubt often shows up strongest exactly when a message lands closest to the truth. If this were truly irrelevant to your life, it would not require this much internal resistance to dismiss. Genuine irrelevance rarely provokes this kind of pushback. Notice how much energy your mind is spending trying to explain this away, and let that energy itself be evidence of relevance rather than proof of dismissal. Here is something worth remembering. You do not need certainty about the outcome in order to take the first step. You simply need enough honesty to admit that something needs to change. Certainty comes later, through action, not before it. Here is a warning about the specific excuse most people reach for next. I will deal with it once things calm down. Once life slows down a little. Life does not slow down on its own. You have to choose to slow down inside it, on purpose, starting with this exact moment. Here is something worth understanding about support. You are not meant to carry this alone. Whatever this particular thing is, consider who in your life might actually help you face it, someone honest enough to tell you the truth and kind enough to stay while you work through it. If no one comes to mind, consider that professional support exists for exactly this reason. Reaching out is not weakness. It is wisdom. Think about the specific qualities that would make someone genuinely helpful to you in this moment. Someone who listens without immediately trying to fix everything. Someone who does not flinch when things get uncomfortable. Someone whose presence makes honesty feel safer rather than harder. If a specific person came to mind, consider reaching out to them today, even with something as simple as, "I need to talk to you about something." That single sentence is often the hardest part. Everything after it tends to feel easier once it has finally been spoken. Here is something about shame, since shame likely showed up somewhere in this reading. Shame about how long you have avoided this. Shame about needing a message like this one to finally notice it. Let that shame go. It does not help you move forward. It only adds weight to an already heavy moment. You are human. Avoidance is common. What matters now is what you do next. Here is something worth remembering about the difference between shame and honest accountability. Shame says something is wrong with you. Honest accountability simply says something needs to change. One paralyzes. The other moves you forward. Choose accountability. Leave shame behind entirely. Here is what changes once you finally face this thing you have been avoiding. Not instant relief, necessarily. But something shifts. The exhausting effort of avoidance stops draining you, and that energy becomes available for something better. Many people describe this as feeling lighter, even while the actual situation has not fully resolved yet. That lightness is real. It is available to you too. Think about how much energy avoidance actually requires. The mental gymnastics needed to keep something buried. The constant, low-level vigilance to avoid triggering topics, avoid certain thoughts, avoid certain feelings. That effort is exhausting, even when it happens so automatically you barely notice it happening. Imagine that exact energy, finally freed up, available instead for things that actually bring you joy, connection, and genuine peace. That is what waits on the other side of finally facing this. Here is something worth understanding about timing. You may be waiting to feel completely ready before you act. That complete readiness rarely arrives before action. It develops through action. Stop waiting for a feeling that may never come in the form you expect. Begin anyway. Think about something significant you have already done in your life despite not feeling fully ready at the time. A job you started nervous. A conversation you had scared. A decision you made without complete certainty. Notice that you survived it, and often grew through it. This particular step will likely work the same way. Here is something worth naming about specific kinds of avoidance, since your particular situation might match one of these closely. Maybe it is your health. A symptom you have noticed but keep explaining away. A doctor's appointment you keep pushing back. Your body has been sending signals. You have been muting them. Maybe it is your finances. Debt you refuse to look at directly. Statements left unopened. A number in your head that feels safer than the actual number on the page. Maybe it is a relationship. Words left unsaid for months, maybe years. Resentment quietly building while you both keep pretending everything is fine. Maybe it is your own mind. Thoughts that scare you a little. Feelings you push down because sitting with them feels unbearable. Maybe it is a dream you buried so deep you almost convinced yourself it never existed. A version of your life you gave up on without ever officially saying goodbye to it. Whichever of these lands closest to your own truth, notice it. Do not flinch away from it this time. Here is something worth understanding about why this particular moment matters so much. Warnings like this rarely arrive twice in exactly the same form. The next one, if it comes, may arrive as a genuine crisis instead of a gentle nudge. This message is the gentle version. Take it seriously while it still is one. Here is something about the people around you who may already sense what you have been avoiding, even without you saying a word. They notice the tension in your voice. The distance in your eyes. The way you change the subject a little too quickly. They are waiting for you to be honest. Not because they want to catch you failing. Because they love you and want to actually help, if only you would let them close enough to do it. Here is something worth sitting with about the version of you on the other side of this. Picture them clearly. Lighter. Steadier. No longer carrying the exhausting weight of pretending everything is fine. That version of you is not fantasy. It is simply what happens when avoidance finally ends and honest effort begins. They are waiting for you too. Here is a final warning before this message reaches its close. If you close this and do nothing, nothing changes. The nudge fades, the noise returns, and this exact moment of clarity slips quietly back into the background. Do not let that happen again. Before you go, take one breath. Just one. Name, specifically, what you have been avoiding. Name, specifically, the one small step you will take today. This does not need to be dramatic. It needs to be real. Trust that this message found you today for a reason. Something in you knew that the moment you stopped scrolling. Consider what it will mean to check in with yourself again tomorrow, and the day after, making sure this moment of clarity actually turns into sustained change rather than fading like so many moments before it. Think about setting a simple, specific reminder for yourself, tomorrow, same time, same place, checking honestly whether the step you named today actually happened. This small structure often makes the difference between a genuine turning point and a moment quickly forgotten once ordinary life resumes its usual pace. Doubt will come back. It always does. When it does, remember this message. Remember what you named just now. Let it pull you back toward honesty instead of away from it. Obstacles will come too. Old excuses. Practical complications. Days when this feels too hard. Expect them. They do not mean you failed. They mean you are human, doing something genuinely difficult. Progress rarely looks dramatic. It looks like showing up again tomorrow, even after a hard day. That is enough. That is actually everything. This message reached you today for a reason. Trust that. Carry it with you. And when you are ready, not before, not because anyone told you to, but when you are genuinely ready, take your next step. Deep down, you already know what that step is. Here is something worth understanding about the specific role your daily environment plays in either supporting or blocking this particular change. If your surroundings are filled with constant noise, constant distraction, constant demands pulling your attention in every direction, genuine reflection becomes nearly impossible to access consistently. Consider what small adjustment to your environment might create even a few minutes of genuine quiet each day, quiet enough to actually hear your own honest thoughts rather than only the noise competing for your attention. This does not need to be elaborate. It might simply mean turning off notifications for 10 minutes, or sitting somewhere quiet before the day fully begins. Here is something worth understanding about the specific role that written reflection can play throughout this process, since thoughts left entirely unspoken and unwritten tend to remain vague, slippery, easy to lose track of. Consider keeping even brief notes as you continue engaging with whatever this message has surfaced, capturing specific moments of clarity, specific fears, specific small steps taken. This record becomes valuable later, offering concrete evidence of genuine movement, something to look back on during moments when progress feels invisible or uncertain. Here is something worth understanding about the specific danger of comparing your particular journey to someone else's. Your avoidance, your fear, your specific circumstances are entirely your own. Someone else's apparent ease in facing similar situations does not diminish how genuinely difficult your own particular situation actually is. Release that comparison. Focus entirely on your own honest next step, measured only against where you personally started, not against anyone else's apparent progress or pace. Here is something worth understanding about setbacks specifically, since they are likely to occur as you continue moving forward from today. You may take that first step, feel genuine relief, and then slip back into old avoidance a few days later. This does not erase the progress already made. Simply begin again. Return to this message if needed. Return to the specific truth you named today. Let it pull you forward again, exactly as many times as it takes. Here is something worth understanding about the specific weight this message has been circling around, the sense that everyone else seems to have things figured out while you alone are struggling. That perception is almost always false. Nearly everyone carries something they have not fully faced, something quietly avoided, something hidden beneath a carefully managed exterior. You are not uniquely broken. You are simply human, exactly like everyone else pretending otherwise around you. Here is something worth understanding about the specific role that self-talk plays throughout this entire process. The words you use internally, right now, in this exact moment, shape whether this message becomes a genuine turning point or simply another forgotten reflection. If your internal voice is currently harsh, critical, dismissive, consider gently softening it, if only slightly, if only for today. You do not need to believe every kind word about yourself immediately. You simply need to stop actively reinforcing the harsh ones. Here is something worth understanding about the specific relationship between honesty and freedom. Nearly every genuine freedom people describe experiencing in their lives traces back to a moment of honest confrontation with something previously avoided. The freedom did not arrive before the honesty. It arrived because of it. Whatever specific freedom you are hoping for, whatever specific relief you are seeking, it is waiting directly on the other side of the exact honesty this message has been asking of you. Here is something worth understanding about children, family members, or anyone who looks up to you, if such people exist in your life. They are watching how you handle difficulty, whether they say so directly or not. What you model for them, through your own choices, teaches them more than any words ever could about how to face their own difficult moments someday. Consider what you want them to learn from watching you today. Let that consideration add weight to your decision to finally act. Here is something worth understanding about the specific cost of silence when it comes to relationships. Unspoken truths do not simply disappear. They accumulate, quietly, creating distance even in relationships that once felt close and easy. If your particular avoidance involves another person, consider how much distance has already grown between you, distance created entirely by things left unsaid. That distance can shrink again, but only once honesty finally enters the space where silence has been living. Here is something worth understanding about physical health specifically, if that is the area this message has been speaking to. Symptoms ignored do not usually resolve themselves. They tend to either stabilize temporarily or slowly worsen, and either way, the not knowing itself creates a background hum of anxiety that quietly drains your daily energy and peace. Getting answers, even uncomfortable ones, tends to feel better than continuing to live inside uncertainty. Consider that appointment you have been postponing. Consider making it today. Here is something worth understanding about the specific relationship between money and hidden shame. Financial avoidance rarely stays contained to finances alone. It tends to bleed into self-worth, into relationships, into how safe or unsafe someone feels moving through daily life. If money is the area you have been avoiding, know that facing the actual numbers, however uncomfortable, tends to feel far less frightening in reality than the vague dread of not knowing feels in your imagination. Here is something worth understanding about grief that has never been fully processed, if that is what has been quietly sitting beneath everything else. Grief postponed does not disappear. It waits, patiently, sometimes for years, showing up sideways in irritability, exhaustion, or a persistent sense that something is simply wrong without an obvious cause. Giving that grief space, even now, even years later, is never too late. It is simply overdue. Here is something more worth understanding before this message truly ends, since one more piece has been waiting to be said. Consider the specific moment, years from now, when you look back on today. Two versions of that memory are possible. In one version, today was the day nothing changed. Another ordinary day among thousands of ordinary days where something important quietly slipped by unnoticed, again. In the other version, today is the day everything shifted. The day you finally stopped, finally listened, finally took one honest step instead of another day of looking away. You get to decide which version becomes true. Right now. Not tomorrow. Now. Here is something worth understanding about how memory tends to compress time. Years from now, this particular season of avoidance, however long it has already lasted, will likely feel like a single, blurred stretch rather than individual days. What will stand out clearly, distinctly, will be the specific moment things changed, if that moment ever actually arrives. Let today be that moment. Let it be the one clear point your future self remembers distinctly, rather than one more indistinguishable day folded into a long, blurred season of avoidance. Here is something worth understanding about small steps and their real power. Nobody solves a years-long avoidance in a single afternoon. That is not what this message is asking of you. It is asking for one step. Just one. A phone call. A conversation. A single honest sentence spoken to someone, or to yourself. That single step breaks the spell. It proves to yourself that change is actually possible, not just theoretical. Think about a domino, the very first one in a long line. It does not need to be large to eventually move much bigger dominoes further down the line. It simply needs to fall. Your one small step functions the same way, setting something larger into motion that a single, small action alone could never fully accomplish on its own. Here is something worth understanding about the voice that will try to talk you out of this. It will sound reasonable. It will say things like, "This is not the right time," or, "I will do it this weekend instead." That voice has already won too many times. Notice it. Thank it for trying to protect you. Then move forward anyway. Consider giving that voice a name, even a small, almost silly one. Something that lets you recognize it clearly the next time it shows up, saying, "There is that voice again," rather than mistaking its words for your own genuine, considered judgment. Separating yourself from that voice, even slightly, tends to loosen its grip considerably. Here is something worth remembering when the old excuses return, because they will. You do not need to silence them permanently. You simply need to act despite their presence, the same way you would walk forward even while nervous, even while unsure, even while afraid. Courage was never the absence of fear. It was moving forward anyway. Think about someone you genuinely admire for their courage, whether someone you know personally or someone known publicly. Consider whether they seemed completely fearless, or whether they simply acted despite visible fear. Nearly always, it is the second. Courage looks like trembling hands still doing the necessary work, not the complete absence of trembling at all. Here is something worth understanding about grace throughout this process. You will not do this perfectly. There will be days you slip back into old avoidance. That does not erase the progress already made. Begin again. As many times as it takes. That is not failure. That is exactly how real change actually happens. Consider adopting a simple phrase to return to during those setback moments, something brief and kind, like, "I am still here, I am still trying," or, "This is one difficult moment, not the whole story." Having this phrase ready in advance, before you actually need it, tends to make it considerably more useful in the exact moment discouragement threatens to take over completely. Here is something worth remembering about the specific weight you have been carrying. It has been heavier than you have let yourself admit, even to yourself. Carrying it in silence has cost you more than you realize. Setting even a small piece of it down today will feel like relief you did not expect. Trust that relief when it comes. Let it confirm that you made the right choice. Think about how it physically feels to set down a heavy bag after carrying it for a long time, that immediate lightness in your shoulders, that sudden ease in your breathing. What you have been carrying emotionally works the same way. The relief is real, physical, immediate, once you finally allow yourself to set even part of it down. Here is something worth understanding about faith throughout this specific moment. You do not need complete certainty about how everything turns out. You simply need enough trust to take the next step without seeing the entire staircase. That is what faith actually looks like in practice. Not blind hope. Simply enough trust to move forward one step at a time. Think about walking down a dark hallway with only a single candle. That candle does not reveal the entire hallway at once. It simply reveals enough of the next few steps to keep walking safely. Faith of this kind works the same way, revealing exactly enough for the step directly in front of you, without requiring the whole path to be lit before you are willing to begin moving. Here is something worth understanding about the people who will notice your change before you fully notice it yourself. They will see you breathing easier, speaking more freely, carrying yourself differently. They may not know exactly what shifted. They will simply notice that something did. Let that be part of your motivation, alongside everything else this message has already offered. Consider a specific person who would likely notice this shift in you soonest, someone who knows you well enough to sense the difference even without an explanation. Picture their reaction, their relief, their genuine happiness at seeing you lighter. Let that image add gentle motivation to whatever step you are about to take. Here is something worth understanding about today's date specifically, whatever day this happens to be for you. This particular day did not have to include this particular message. Something aligned to bring it to you exactly now, at exactly this point in your life. Do not waste that alignment. Think about all the ordinary circumstances that had to line up for you to be reading these exact words right now. The mood you happen to be in. The moment you happen to pause. None of it required to happen exactly this way, and yet it did. Let that specific, quiet coincidence carry a little more weight than you might normally give it. Here is one more thing worth understanding before this message reaches its true close. The warning you received today was never meant to frighten you into paralysis. It was meant to wake you gently enough to actually move, rather than freeze entirely under the weight of fear. You are not frozen. You are reading this. You are still here. That alone proves you are ready for what comes next. Notice how far you have already come simply by staying present through this entire reflection, rather than closing it partway through the way you might have closed countless other messages before. That persistence itself is evidence of genuine readiness, worth acknowledging before you move into whatever comes next. Thank you for watching this before it was too late. Be gentle with yourself as you begin, one honest step at a time.